This naval captain served as one of the strongest warriors under the leadership of Rear Admiral Transcore Dragon. This captain, infused with ancient modifications, possessed insurmountable power that threatened the balance within Aqua Force, but now in war times is revived to protect what he loves most. Equipped with Z-Pain, one of the original hydro energy weapons, Lascard Revonn is ready to dive into action. Lascard Revonn is a seasoned fighter, but even more adept in commanding his forces. Through excellent tactics and a calm mind in the midst of battle allows him to bring out the full potential of his troops. This is seen as best in his abilities. His first ability allows him to access and exploit the opponent's main weaknesses, as once per turn he can rest one rearguard to lower the opponent's base power by 5k power. This removes the best asset any opponent can have, a higher base power. Through this ability, you allow almost all of your units to hit the opponent's Vanguard, as they are either lower to 8k or 7k power if they are sitting on a grade 3. This in turn also means that defensive triggers are less effective, meaning you're eliminating one of Aqua Force's biggest weaknesses. But that's not the only thing Revonn can do. When it's time for him to attack, if you have utilized your battalion to soften up the enemy, you can dish out extra damage, as when you have 5 or more rested rearguards, you get an additional 15k power, an extra drive, and if you have a grade 3 in the soul, you will get an extra crit, making the Vanguard attack extremely powerful. This really showcases Lascard Revonn's prowess to command a fleet, but the best way to demonstrate that is not through the captain, but through the troops he commands. One of Revonn's best units is Blue Wave Marine General Gallius. This unit can become a great attacker that hit over defensive triggers when paired off with Revonn's ability and the power of an Axle Circle, but his main battle strength comes from the fact that he can restand whenever the Vanguard attacks. This allows you to increase the overall pressure you can apply, as you can still give your triggers to the attacking units. Another powerful unit is Blue Wave Marine General Voivus. This card is similar to Gallius, however his restand is for a different cost, making it possible to spread your resources over your different skills. Also, Voivus allows you to flood the board with multiple cards if needed to fulfill for your different skill conditions. Another powerful unit that synergizes with Revonn is Battle Siren Nerissa. This grade 1 allows you to use Revonn's rest ability without losing power. In fact, it makes this unit even stronger, and her other ability allows her to fuel her own skill, but also to clear the field against control clans. The grade 2 version of Nerissa, Coral Assault, is great to fuel soul for cards like Nerissa and Voivus, but it's also great on its own, as paired off with Revonn's minus 5k ability, he gets an increase of 20k power on a normal circle, which makes him a very powerful beater. As a support grade 3, we can look at 4th Vessel Dragon. This card makes it possible to still minus the opponent's base power, allowing you to still utilize your new restanders. Also, its extra power and potential protection makes him a solid beater when paired off with Lascard Revonn. Another powerful card for Lascard Revonn is Wheel Assault. Because Revonn minus the opponent's base power instead of powering up the front row allows you to get more value out of your Wheel Assaults. Also, if you have 2 Wheel Assaults, you get more value out of your restanders. These aren't the only units Revonn can rely on, as he can call in the power of the Blue Wings. This sub-archetype synergizes really well with Revonn, as they want to attack before the Vanguard attacks, as they can restand when drive checking heals, and with Revonn gaining an extra drive and that he wants to attack last, means they are a match made in heaven. Lascard Revonn, like most Aqua Force decks, is quite resource heavy. The only difference is this new build doesn't rely on a single type of resources. They use Counterblast, Soul Blast, and even cards from hand. So build your deck with a good balance in mind. Use Coral Assault or Nerissa to help a bit with the soul cost, and keep the amount of counterblasting units on a low unless you are also using their counter charger. In the trigger department, you mainly go for crits as you attack with your Vanguard last, but If you have a lot of Gallius and or Foivus in your build, you might be able to capitalize on fronts as well, but that's very dependent on the fact that you also get them onto the field. So keep that in mind when deciding your trigger lineup. Also, draws might help you quite a bit, as you need a quite sizable field to activate your most powerful skills. In terms of which type of Excel marker you want to pick, it's quite easy. In most cases, you go for Excel 2, as it gives you the extra draw, which is super important in this deck. And with the minus 5k of Revonn, you can see an Excel 2 as a normal Excel 1. But in some rare occasions, Excel 1 might do the trick, as it can make your Nerissas hit effectively for 33k, or your Coral Salts for 39k, which are some insanely high numbers. Also, your Restanding Gallius hits for 29k on Excel 1. So don't underestimate the power of 10k and minus 5k of Revonn stacking up on each other. Last card Revonn is unique under the Aquaforce playstyles, as it's more of a mid-range deck. You save most of your cards for your great free turns and then go into full gear under the guidance of Revonn. But outside of that, it's placed very similar like your typical Aquaforce deck. You chain your multi-tags together to unleash mayhem on your opponent while they suffer from a lowered base power, which makes them an easy picking for any unit. There are countless of options to approach this strategy, but in this spotlight we'll highlight two distinct builds. One that takes the aggressive multi-tech approach, where we try to unleash as many attacks as possible to capitalize on lowered base power as much as possible, and the other build takes advantage of the fact that Revonn needs to attack last and that he gets an additional drive check. But before all that, let's take a look at how we can build Last Card Revonn straight from Team Dragon's Vanity. We can see all the basic support and Revonn core cards, from the Great Freeze that manipulate the opponent's base power to Revonn's multi-tackers and even Nerissa for even more consistency. But besides those fundamental cards, we see some new additions that help with the overall consistency and boost our early game. First off, we have Blue Wave Soldier Senior Baragius. This allows us to search for our Great Freeze, mainly Last Card Revonn, but he can also become a solid booster or beater that can help overcome defensive triggers. It, together with a 9k, can make a solid 22k column. Then followed up, we have a unique Grade 1 named Frontal Sailor. This Grade 1 allows us to apply early pressure and paint a big target onto the field so they waste resource removing it instead of your Vanguard. This, together with Baragios, can make a solid 30k column, which in the early game is an insane number against Force Grade 2s. The last new unit is Marine General of Hetsy's Phenaces. This is a great right target when going up against a Force clan where you don't want to call too many units that can't hit. This way you can call a Grade 2 to the back row early game, but still apply some pressure. But the big play this card opens up is that you can combo it with Nerissa and create a 14k Vanguard attack and 18k rearguard attack, and if combined together in one column is a 32k Vanguard swing on turn 2. The main strategy is to ride up to Revonn and utilize your multi-attackers to unleash strong attacks. This means you want to save most of your Grade 2s for your later turns, but you have ways to unleash a strong early game as well, because you can utilize Frontal Sailor. Also, Baragius is a great unit to call in the early game, and combining Phenaces and Nerissa can be a great way to apply pressure. But Baragios and Gallius are the real players in the early game, because if you call 4 rearguards, you can have the last attack attain 5k, meaning the column hit over defensive trigger. But if you have them both in that column, you can increase the column with an additional 10k. So combining the various Grade 2s and Grade 1s, you can unleash a powerful early game followed up with a strong Revonn turn. But it's important to know when to call which unit, as some of these cards are essential for your Revonn's turns, like Nerissa and Gallius. As for your Revonn turns itself, they are quite self-explanatory. You want to call and utilize Gallius and Foivus for the multi-attacks, and use a Nerissa to get even more value out of your cards. Call your Gallius to an Excel circle to get maximum value out of your attackers, as he can become a nice 24k beater with Revonn's minus 5k. We have seen how Revonn can unleash some good amounts of attacks and even create a solid early game, but let's crank all that to 11 as we assemble the full might of the Navy. We can see a huge shift in grade distribution with a total of 16 Grade 2s with only 4 Grade 3s, which are of course copies of Revonn. Within the Grade 2 lineup we have Gallius and Coral Assault, but instead of Foivus we have Tidal Assault. Tidal uses the same overall resources, only he uses Soul for restanding, which overall is a bit better than the discard trade for Voivus. But another big difference is that Tidal can be used in the early game as well as a free restander in the late game, as he can get the trigger power of Revonn and then swing twice with a power increase, which gives the deck a lot more flexibility. We can also see another new grade 2 that is Marine General of the Restless Tide, Elgos. This unit is yet another multi-attacker that can also give us some flexibility in the early game, as it can restand any unit. But there is something different about him, as we can also search him out for free with another grade 1 in this list named Stormrider Nicholas. This can be a potential 3+1, but also as a 11k booster can do in some work, as he can turn a 9k into a 20k attack. The overall game plan is the same, only now we have a couple of more options. As for the early game, we can of course utilize the Tidal Assault Elgos combo, where we can attack potentially 4 times. But this is quite risky and costs a lot of resources. It's much better to save some of your resources for the later turns, but with grade 1s like Nicholas and Baragios that you want to use as early as possible, you can dish out some strong attacks that can hit over defensive triggers. But try to combine them all with Coral Assault, as he can function as a great final swing and move into the soul to combat damage denying. He can even be a solid restand target if you have the resources to swarm the field, like having multiple corals and maybe even Orisa to replenish your hand for next turn. But the real fun happens during the grade 3 turns, as you have multiple units that can restand, so you can unleash an insane amount of attacks. But you also have the option to restand your titles after the Vanguard attack to get even more value out of your triggers. Another play that you can do is to get 2 extra attacks out of your wheel assaults thanks to Gallius. Because if you have 2 Exo Circles, you can call 1 Gallius to the Exo Circle and 1 behind your Vanguard. Attack with the Gallius, then attack with the column that has a wheel assault and swap the 2 Gallius. Then attack with the other Exo Circle and the new standing Gallius, and then attack with the Vanguard so you can activate Revonn's full ability. Restand both Gallius and then attack with the Exo Circle Gallius, followed up with the other standing column that can still be boosted by the second wheel assault, and swap the 2 Gallions once again. And now you can attack with the new Gallius that is still standing on the Exo Circle. This are 8 attacks for the cost of 2 counterblasts, and you can extend or empower these combos with of course units like Elgos, Tidal and Coral if you want to do so. So as you can see, a lot of power can come out of nowhere where you are commanding your troops to their full potential. Before we end this video, there is one more strategy that I want to highlight, and those are the Blue Wings. These Blue Wings all empower each other and share a similar skill. Whenever you drive check a heal trigger, you get to restand all of your Blue Wings for free. However, each of them have their own special ability. Blue Wings of Empathy, Macarius can get resist to deal with cards like Berserk Dragon, and if you have a full field, all of your units can get the resist ability. Then Blue Wings of Resonance, Maxios, is a great booster or attacker that only gets stronger the more units you have. Blue Wings of Great Cause Fellows can be a solid 14k beater, but its main value comes from the fact that he can be a solid restander that isn't restricted to an attack pattern. Blue Wings of Obduracy Simeon is a solid high base unit that can be a good ride target, but can also be a good beater. And finally, we have Blue Wings of Faith, Basilia. This is our plus engine and allows us to flood the board. Ideally, you want to call a lot of Blue Wings in the early game so you can benefit from the potential free heal restand. So to sustain this, we can rely on Basilia to get enough cards to hand so we don't run dry when going into last card Revonn. Also, Baragios and Basilia both help each other, one making the other more consistent, and both filter the deck to increase the chance of hitting those oh so important heal triggers. Voivus is in this list mainly to flood the board with even more Blue Wings and not necessarily for his restand ability. Finally, Valios can function as Tidal Assault as a restander after the Vanguard attack to get more value out of your triggers. The know when to save his restand and when to not to do that mainly comes down to the fact when you are certain that you won't hit a heal and you can go for the late restand. Last card Revonn is a unique new addition to Aquaforce. His nature follows a more mid-range approach, but with the new support allows you to unleash even more devastating early attacks that, combined with various resource costs and battle tactics, makes Revonn an easy deck to pilot, but a hard one to master as there are so many different choices to make, which leads to more potential mistakes. Revonn is ready to make waves on the battlefield of Cray, and with his new battalion he can overwhelm any opposition that dares to challenge him. Now the question arises, are you with him or against him. And that wraps up the final deck spotlight for Team Dragon's Vanity, as this was the deck spotlight for last card Revonn. A interesting approach to Aquaforce. As per usual, it's a more aggro, high tempo, early game clan with a more focus on rushing, but in this case we still can attain this rush in a more high powered basis, but in the overall scheme of things it's more of a mid-rangey deck that tends to go off once you ride into last card Revonn and you unleash your powerful multi-attackers. If you want to have more content like these spotlights, then check out these spotlights for Narukami's Dragonic Vanquisher list, and as well as the new edition for Shadow Paladin with Claret Sword Dragon. But if you want something different and a more of a budget-friendly approach, then stick around, as next up we're gonna tackle the budget deck options for Shadow Paladin, Narukami, and even Aquaforce. As always, this video has been brought to you by our lovely patrons over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, then head over to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a Patreon today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one!